Eleanor Ellie Yates hated Sundays. The city was a hollow echo of itself, drained of its weekday energy. She hated Sundays even more when they involved house-sitting for her eccentric Aunt Agatha. Agatha, bless her heart, lived in a preposterously expensive Mayfair apartment building called the Ravenswood, a gothic monstrosity that reeked of old money and unspoken sins. This Sunday, however, was worse than usual. Instead of the usual musty smell of antique furniture and simmering resentments, the Ravenswood was thick with a new aroma, an unsettling mix of stale spices and something indefinably wrong. It hung in the air like a shroud, clinging to the ornate wallpaper and seeping under the heavy oak doors. Ellie had been tasked with retrieving a valuable porcelain cat, Agatha's pride and joy, from the Delicatessen Mayfair suite, a name that had always struck Ellie as bizarrely out of place in the building's otherwise somber atmosphere. Agatha had explained, vaguely, that the previous tenant had been a collector of exotic meats and had whimsically named the suite. Swallowing her unease, Ellie pressed the tarnished brass button for the elevator. The doors groaned open, revealing a dimly lit interior lined with cracked mirrors. The car ascended with a series of disconcerting clicks and whirs, each sound amplifying Ellie's growing disquiet. Floor 6. The Delicatessen Mayfair suite. The hallway was even darker than the elevator, the air thick with the cloying scent that had greeted her downstairs. The walls, typically adorned with landscape paintings in gilded frames, were bare. The carpet felt strangely damp beneath her feet. Suite 6B. The door was heavy, solid oak, and bore a simple, unadorned brass plate. No number, just a small, intricately carved image of a salivating hound. Ellie shivered. It felt like something out of a gothic horror novel. Taking a deep breath, she used the key Agatha had given her and pushed the door open. The scent hit her like a physical blow. Rotting pastrami. That was the closest she could get to describing it. But beneath the pastrami, there was something else. A faint, metallic tang, like dried blood. The Delicatessen suite was surprisingly spacious. A large living room sprawled before her, dominated by a massive, mahogany butcher block table. It was meticulously clean, unsettlingly so, considering the overwhelming odor. Moonlight filtered through the grimy windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. "Hello," Ellie called out, her voice sounding weak and fragile in the oppressive silence. Only the creaking of the building and the rhythmic drip of a leaky faucet answered her. She moved cautiously into the room, her eyes darting around, trying to penetrate the gloom. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air felt heavy, suffocating. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye. In the corner of the room, partially obscured by shadow, a figure stood motionless. Ellie gasped. It wasn't human. The figure was tall, impossibly so, its silhouette elongated and distorted by the shadows. It was draped in something that looked vaguely like a butcher's apron, stained a deep, unsettling crimson. In its hand, it held a gleaming butcher's cleaver. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Ellie. She backed away slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Who are you?" she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. The figure didn't answer. It simply stood there, unmoving, its presence radiating a palpable sense of menace. The scent of rotting pastrami intensified, filling Ellie's nostrils, choking her. Then, a sound, a low, guttural growl, emanating from the figure's veiled face. It resonated deep within Ellie's chest, setting her teeth on edge. She turned and fled, stumbling back towards the door, her hand fumbling for the knob. She had to get out, now, but the door wouldn't open. She tugged, pushed, and rattled the handle frantically, but it was locked fast. Panic clawed at her throat. The figure began to move, slowly, deliberately. It stepped out of the shadows, its form becoming clearer in the dim light. Its face was hidden behind a grotesque, crudely fashioned mask made of dried meat. Slices of cured ham formed the eyes, moldy salami the nose, and a row of dried sausages the snarling mouth. The cleaver gleamed in its hand. Ellie screamed, a raw, primal sound of terror. She threw herself against the door, desperate to escape. Then, a sharp, excruciating pain ripped through her arm. The cleaver had found its mark. She screamed again, louder this time, as the figure advanced on her, its growls growing more ferocious. She was trapped. Suddenly, a glint of porcelain caught her eye. On a shelf above the butcher block table, she saw it. Agatha's prized porcelain cat. It was almost mocking her from its perch. With a surge of adrenaline, she yanked the shelf free from the wall, sending the cat crashing to the floor. The shattering ceramic seemed to momentarily distract the figure. Seizing her chance, Ellie kicked out with her foot, connecting with the figure's shin. It stumbled back, momentarily stunned. She wrenched open the door and burst into the hallway. She didn't stop running until she reached the elevator. She mashed the down button repeatedly, tears streaming down her face, the throbbing pain in her arm a constant reminder of the horror she had just encountered. The elevator doors finally opened, and she stumbled inside, collapsing against the wall. As the car descended, she caught a glimpse of the Delicatessen suite door opening again. The figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, the cleaver dripping something dark and viscous. It was watching her. Shaking and bleeding, Ellie burst into Agatha's apartment. Agatha, dressed in a silk dressing gown and puffing on a long cigarette holder, looked up in surprise. Eleanor, what on earth? Ellie, barely able to speak, recounted her horrifying experience in the Delicatessen suite. Agatha listened, her expression progressively changing from mild amusement to disbelief to something approaching fear. A figure with a meat mask, Agatha stammered, her cigarette trembling in her hand. That's impossible. It's not impossible, Aunt Agatha. I saw it. It attacked me. Look at my arm. Ellie held up her bleeding arm, the cut deep and ragged. Agatha took one look and paled. She rushed to the liquor cabinet and poured herself a generous shot of brandy. Ellie, dear, I haven't been entirely truthful with you about the Ravenswood, she said, her voice trembling slightly. There are stories, unsavory stories. She explained that the Ravenswood had been built in the early 20th century by a wealthy meatpacking baron named Silas Blackwood. Blackwood was rumored to be a man of unconventional tastes and practices. He was obsessed with meat, Agatha said, her voice dropping to a whisper. He believed it held some kind of power. He performed experiments, terrible experiments. The Delicatessen suite, Agatha revealed, had been Blackwood's personal lair. He had filled it with exotic meats from around the world, some of them human. Rumors persisted that Blackwood had been driven insane by his obsessions and had died a gruesome death in the suite. People say his spirit still haunts the Ravenswood, Agatha said, her eyes wide with fear. Especially the Delicatessen suite. Ellie felt a chill run down her spine. It all made sense now. The smell, the figure, the cleaver. It was all connected to Silas Blackwood and his macabre obsession. But there was something else. Something Agatha wasn't telling her. Ellie could see it in her eyes. A flicker of guilt. A hint of complicity. Aunt Agatha, Ellie said, her voice hardening. You know more than you're letting on. What really happened in the Delicatessen suite? Agatha hesitated, her face a mask of internal conflict. Finally, she sighed and said, all right, Eleanor, I'll tell you everything. But you won't like it. Agatha revealed that Silas Blackwood wasn't simply a meatpacking baron with a penchant for the macabre. He was also a member of a secret society, the Brotherhood of the Carcass, a group dedicated to the ritualistic consumption of human flesh. My grandfather was also a member, Agatha confessed, her voice laced with shame. He inherited Blackwood's apartment after his unfortunate demise, and he continued the traditions. Ellie stared at her aunt, horrified. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. But that's not all, Agatha continued, her voice barely audible. The Brotherhood believed that the act of consuming human flesh imbued them with the strength and power of the deceased, and they believed that certain cuts of meat were more potent than others. She explained that Blackwood had become obsessed with finding the sacred cut, a mythical piece of flesh said to grant immortality. He had spent years searching for it, experimenting on countless victims, all in the name of his twisted beliefs. And did he find it? Ellie asked, dread filling her voice. No one knows for sure, Agatha said, but the rumors say that he came close, that he discovered a way to preserve human flesh indefinitely, to keep it fresh and potent for centuries. Ellie suddenly understood the significance of the porcelain cat. It wasn't just a valuable antique. It was a disguised security measure. The shattering porcelain had triggered a hidden compartment, revealing a secret passage behind the shelf. The passage, Agatha claimed, led to Blackwood's hidden laboratories, the place where he conducted his experiments and stored his specimens. I haven't been down there in years, Agatha said, her face pale. It's not a place for the faint of heart. Ellie knew what she had to do. She had to go down there. She had to find out what Blackwood had been hiding. She had to stop whatever was happening in the Delicatessen suite before it was too late. I'm going down there, Aunt Agatha, she said, her voice firm. I'm going to find out what Blackwood left behind. Agatha tried to dissuade her, but Ellie was resolute. She had to face the horrors of the Ravenswood, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been touched by Silas Blackwood's legacy of blood. Armed with a flashlight and a butcher knife from Agatha's kitchen, a grimly ironic choice, Ellie thought. Ellie descended into the narrow passage. The air grew colder, damper, and the scent of rotting pastrami intensified, almost unbearable. The passage led to a winding staircase that descended deep into the bowels of the Ravenswood. The walls were rough-hewn stone, covered in patches of mold and glistening with condensation. Finally, the stairs ended at a heavy, iron-bound door. Ellie took a deep breath and pushed it open. The air inside was thick with the stench of decay, so potent it almost made her gag. The room was vast and cavernous, illuminated by a single flickering gas lamp hanging from the ceiling. Ellie swept the beam of her flashlight across the room. What she saw nearly made her faint. Rows upon rows of shelves lined the walls, filled with jars and containers of all shapes and sizes. Each jar contained something unspeakable. Preserved human organs, limbs, and faces, floating in a murky, formaldehyde-like substance. Ellie stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. This was Blackwood's laboratories, his chamber of horrors. As she moved deeper into the room, she noticed a large, stainless steel operating table in the center. It was covered in stains and equipped with an array of surgical instruments, each one gleaming menacingly under the gas lamp. She then saw a series of cages, rusty and dented, lining one wall. Inside, she found the bones of small animals, and something else. Something disturbingly human-shaped. A chill ran down her spine. Blackwood hadn't just experimented on humans. He had tortured them. Then, she saw it. In the far corner of the room, behind a curtain of thick canvas, was a large, walk-in freezer. A single word was etched into the metal door in spidery script. Sanctum. Ellie knew, with a sickening certainty, that whatever was inside that freezer was the key to everything. It was where Blackwood's darkest secrets lay. She reached out, her hand trembling, and pulled back the canvas curtain. The freezer loomed before her, cold and silent. Taking a deep breath, she grasped the handle and pulled the door open. A blast of frigid air washed over her, and she stepped inside. The sanctum was a frozen wasteland, the walls coated in thick layers of ice. In the center of the room, suspended from the ceiling by thick chains, was a single, massive block of ice. Inside the ice, perfectly preserved, was a human figure. The figure encased in ice was male, middle-aged, and possessed an unsettlingly serene expression. He was naked, his skin pale and translucent, his eyes closed as if he were asleep. Ellie stared at him, mesmerized. Who was he? What was he doing here? Then, she noticed something. Etched into the ice, just below the figure's chest, was a single word. Rex. Rex. King. Blackwood had found his sacred cut. He had preserved the body of a king, believing that by consuming his flesh, he would gain immortality. But he hadn't consumed it. He had preserved it. Why? Suddenly, a horrifying realization dawned on Ellie. Blackwood hadn't just wanted to become immortal. He wanted to rule. He wanted to awaken the frozen king and use him to seize power. And someone, somewhere, was trying to continue his work. A noise behind her snapped her out of her reverie. She whirled around, her heart pounding in her chest. Standing in the doorway of the freezer was the figure in the butcher's apron, the meat mask twisted into a grotesque grin. He raised the cleaver. Ellie screamed. This time, there was no escape. The figure lunged at her, the cleaver whistling through the air. She ducked, and the blade slammed into the ice, sending shards flying. She grabbed a handful of ice and hurled it at the figure's face. It recoiled, momentarily blinded. Seizing her chance, Ellie shoved the figure back and slammed the freezer door shut. She heard a muffled roar of rage from inside. The figure was trapped. But for how long? She knew she had to get out of the lab. She had to warn someone about what Blackwood had been planning. But as she turned to leave, she saw something that stopped her in her tracks. On the wall near the freezer, she saw a series of symbols etched into the stone. They were ancient, arcane, and disturbingly familiar. She had seen them before. In Agatha's apartment. In a hidden compartment behind a bookshelf. The symbols were a key. A key to unlocking the Frozen King. And Agatha knew about them. Ellie raced back to Agatha's apartment, her mind reeling. She had trusted her aunt, confided in her, but now she realized that Agatha was deeply involved in Blackwood's legacy. She burst through the door, her eyes blazing with anger. Aunt Agatha, what are those symbols? What do they mean? Agatha's face paled. She stammered. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Ellie shouted. I saw them in the lab. They are on that wall. They are a key to unlocking the Frozen King. Agatha sighed, her shoulders slumping with defeat. All right, Eleanor, she said, her voice resigned. You deserve the truth. She explained that the symbols were part of an ancient ritual, a spell designed to awaken the Frozen King and bind him to the will of whoever performed the ceremony. My grandfather taught me the ritual, Agatha said, her voice trembling. He believed that it was our destiny to awaken the king and restore him to power. Ellie stared at her aunt in disbelief. She had always seen Agatha as an eccentric old woman, but now she realized that she was a dangerous fanatic. But why? Aunt Agatha, why would you want to do this? Agatha's eyes burned with a fierce intensity. Because the world is broken, Eleanor. It's corrupt and decadent. We need a strong leader, someone who can restore order and justice. And you think a Frozen King is the answer? Ellie scoffed. He's a relic from the past. He wouldn't understand our world. He will be guided, Agatha said, her voice unwavering. He will be guided by us. We will shape him into the ruler we need. Ellie realized that she couldn't reason with her aunt. Agatha was too far gone, consumed by her delusions of grandeur. I won't let you do this, Aunt Agatha, Ellie said, her voice firm. I'm going to stop you. Agatha's expression hardened. I'm afraid I can't allow that, Eleanor. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, ornate dagger. The blade gleamed in the dim light. I'm sorry it has to be this way, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. But you've become a threat to our plans. Ellie stared at her aunt, horrified. She couldn't believe that Agatha would try to kill her, but she knew that she had no choice. She had to fight back. Ellie lunged at Agatha, knocking the dagger from her hand. The two women grappled on the floor, their struggle fueled by fear and desperation. Agatha was surprisingly strong, her grip like iron. She managed to pin Ellie down, her eyes filled with a cold, calculating rage. It's for the best, Eleanor, Agatha hissed. You'll understand someday. She reached for the dagger again, her fingers closing around the handle. Just then, the door to the apartment burst open. Standing in the doorway was the figure in the butcher's apron. He had broken free from the freezer. He raised the cleaver, his meat mask twisted into a terrifying grin. Agatha gasped and scrambled away from Ellie. The figure turned his attention to her, his eyes filled with a murderous rage. He stalked towards her, the cleaver dripping with a dark, viscous fluid. No. Please, Agatha screamed, backing away in terror. The figure didn't answer. He simply raised the cleaver and brought it down with a resounding thud. Ellie watched in horror as Agatha fell to the floor, a gaping wound in her chest. The figure turned to face Ellie, his eyes burning with hatred. She knew that she was next. But as the figure advanced on her, something strange began to happen. The apartment began to shake. The lights flickered. The air crackled with energy. Then, a voice. A deep, resonant voice, echoing through the room. Enough. The figure stopped in its tracks, its body trembling. The cleaver fell from its hand. The voice spoke again. Release me. Ellie looked around, trying to find the source of the voice. Then, she saw it. One of the ancient symbols etched into the wall behind her was glowing with an eerie light. The symbol was connected to the freezer, to the Frozen King. The ritual was beginning. The Delicatessen Mayfair suite began to transform. The blood-stained walls peeled away, revealing ancient stone brick. The furniture vanished, replaced by flickering candlelight and strange, Gothic artifacts. Ellie found herself standing in what appeared to be an ancient ritual chamber, bathed in an unearthly glow. And in the center of the chamber, the ice block containing the Frozen King began to melt. The ice melted rapidly, revealing the Frozen King in all his chilling glory. As the last shards of ice fell away, the king's eyes snapped open. They were cold, calculating, and filled with an ancient power. He stood up, his body stiff and unyielding. He looked around the chamber, his gaze sweeping over Ellie and the figure in the butcher's apron. Where am I? He asked, his voice deep and resonant. What has happened? The figure in the butcher's apron knelt before the king, its body trembling. My lord, it said, its voice a guttural whisper. You have been awakened. We are here to serve you. The king looked at the figure with disdain. Serve me? You are nothing but a puppet. He turned his attention to Ellie. His eyes narrowed. And who are you? He asked. His voice cold and imperious. Why have you disturbed my slumber? Ellie stood her ground, her fear overridden by a surge of defiance. I'm here to stop you, she said, her voice firm. I know who you are. I know what you want. The king laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the chamber. Stop me. You are but a mortal. You cannot comprehend the power that I possess. He raised his hand, and the figure in the butcher's apron rose to its feet, its eyes burning with a fanatical devotion. Kill her, the king commanded, his voice devoid of emotion. The figure lunged at Ellie, the cleaver once again raised high. She knew that she couldn't fight him. He was too strong, too powerful, but she had one last chance. She remembered what Agatha had said about the ritual, about how it could be used to bind the king to the will of whoever performed it. She knew that she had to disrupt the ritual. She had to sever the connection between the king and his followers. But how? Then, she remembered the ancient symbols etched into the wall. They were the key to the ritual. She ran towards the wall, dodging the figure's attacks. She reached out and touched one of the symbols. A surge of energy coursed through her body, making her gasp. The symbol began to glow with a blinding light. The king screamed, clutching his head in agony. The figure in the butcher's apron stumbled back, its body racked with convulsions. Ellie touched another symbol, and another. The chamber filled with light, and the air crackled with power. The king's screams grew louder, more desperate. The figure in the butcher's apron collapsed to the floor, its body twitching uncontrollably. Ellie knew that she was running out of time. The king was regaining control. She touched the last symbol. A blinding flash of light filled the chamber, followed by a deafening roar. Then, silence. When the light cleared, the ritual chamber had vanished. Ellie found herself back in Agatha's apartment. The walls stained with blood, the furniture overturned. The king was gone. The figure in the butcher's apron was gone. Only Ellie remained, standing amidst the wreckage of a nightmare. She looked down at her hands, trembling. She had done it. She had stopped the king. She had broken the cycle of violence and madness that had plagued the Ravenswood for centuries. But at what cost? Agatha was dead. The Ravenswood was forever tainted. Ellie herself was haunted by the memories of what she had seen, what she had done. She knew that she could never forget what had happened in the Delicatessen Mayfair suite. The scent of rotting pastrami would forever linger in her nostrils, a constant reminder of the horrors she had faced. But she also knew that she had survived. She had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. She was no longer just Eleanor Yates, the house sitter. She was a survivor, a warrior. She turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving behind the ghosts of the Ravenswood. As she stepped out into the dawn-lit streets of Mayfair, she took a deep breath of fresh air. The city was stirring to life, oblivious to the horrors that had unfolded within the walls of the Ravenswood. Ellie didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she was ready to face it. She had stared into the abyss, and she had not been consumed. She had broken the Delicatessen Mayfair suite, and in doing so, she had finally freed herself. Years later, Eleanor Yates, now a successful lawyer, still occasionally found herself thinking about the Ravenswood. She never spoke of what had happened there, but the memories never truly faded. The Delicatessen Mayfair suite remained vacant, its door sealed shut. The Ravenswood was eventually converted into a luxury hotel, but the suite was never reopened. Some said that it was haunted, that the scent of rotting pastrami still lingered in the air, a warning to those who dared to venture too close.